Hey, we're going to talk for a little bit about some tips and tricks that you can use to help you understand what's going on with coefficients in algebra. So, remember, a coefficient is just the number that's in front of a letter in a term. So in this case, the term is 3x. The coefficient of x is 3. But what about in this next one? What if I had the term negative 3x? So I'm looking for the number in front of the x. I have to include the sign. So in this case, I would say the coefficient is negative 3. So it's not just the 3. I have to use the sign as well. So I'd say the coefficient is negative 3. All right. What about this one though? What if I just said, well, what's the coefficient of x in this case? Now, don't freak out because there's no number there. So you might think, well, there is no coefficient, but there is. There's a hidden number. If you see no number in front of a pronumeral, there's a hidden 1 there. We just don't write the 1. So we leave it out. By default, it's there. So I would say the coefficient of x is 1. And the same idea applies when there's a negative coefficient. In this case, negative x. Once again, I could look at it and go, there's nothing there. But remember we said if there's nothing in front of the letter, there is that invisible 1 that I can put back in. So in this case, I would say the coefficient of negative x, sorry, the coefficient of x here would be negative 1. All right, hang in, we're nearly there. What about this one though? X over 3. What's the coefficient, in this case, of x? Now, we're going to write this a little bit differently, and I'm just going to do a little visual tip that I like to use to help me understand this. First of all, we know if we see the letter on its own, there's an invisible 1 in front. So let's put the 1 back in. So there's a 1 in front of the x. I'm now going to take the x, and I'm just going to slide it off the fraction. Now, I'm allowed to do that within the term. Okay, as long as I'm just working with that one term, I can do that. I'm going to slide the x away, so to speak. So now I've pulled the x out. So if I have a look here, I've basically taken the x and I've just pulled it out. Okay, so now it's kind of separate and I've left the rest of the fraction there on its own. Looking at that, I can see there's a 1/3 now in front of the x. So the coefficient is 1/3. Okay, so the coefficient, when I've got x over 3, I'm basically just going to slide the x off and I'm left with the 1/3. So look at the same idea, but one that's maybe a little bit more tricky. What about if I had this term here? Negative 6x over 5. Let's do the same little trick. I'm working within the term. I'm going to take the x and I'm just going to slide it off. I'm going to slide it off the edge of the fraction. Okay, I might just do that again. I'm going to take the x and I'm just going to slide it off the edge of the fraction. Now it's sort of standing there on its own and it has this in front of it. And what it has in front of it is, in fact, a negative 6 over 5. So in this case, the coefficient would be negative 6 over 5.